Hey, Freya, it's Mikayo just responding to you. I got your question, and so I thought I'd just send you a video response because that's easier than me trying to type everything out. I'm easier at talking and explaining it than trying to type it, and probably wouldn't really make sense if I typed it anyway. So just thought I would send you a private video. So this is just for you. Nobody else can see this video. I got your question right here in front of me, and hopefully you got an email. You're supposed to get an email telling you that you got this. So hopefully you'll get that. But I'm not sure I totally understand your question. So it says, hi, it's FreyaRain. I asked you on your last video if all Christians will pass away before rapture, and my pastor says only the Jews will still be I've come rapture. So I'm thinking you mean that only the Jews will still be alive come the rapture. And it says, and then you say, is this before the rapture or during the tribulation? And will major persecution happen here like around the rest of the world before rapture? I didn't hear your answer, which I understood because of your dogs and so forth. So no problem there. So what I'm understanding from your question is that you're saying that your pastor is saying that all Christians will be dead, basically, to put it bluntly, that they will not be alive when the rapture happens, and that only the Jews will still be alive when the harpazo or rapture happens. So, okay. Interesting question. I've never heard anybody suggest that before, so it's kind of a new one. And then your second question, will major persecution happen here like around the rest of the world before rapture? Okay. Okay, good. Two good questions. So let's take a look at this. Let me open up another page. And real quick, I think the first thing that comes to mind, obviously, is 1 Thessalonians 4. Because Paul is saying, we who are still alive. Now, I'm not sure where your pastor would be getting that argument that only Jews will be alive. Because I don't know anywhere in the Bible where it says only Jews will be alive. I don't think that's I guess the simple way to answer that question is that unless I'm misunderstanding something here, what your pastor is saying is unbiblical. And why I say that is because all people will still be alive. All nations will still be alive come the end. When Jesus returns, there will still be people from every nation. So to say that only Jews will be alive by that point, because to say that only Jews will be alive come the rapture, then that would mean that only Jews are going to be alive, period, right? Because once you kill everybody else off and you only have Jews left, then that's only Jews and nobody else. So I don't see anywhere biblically that would back that up. In fact, I see the opposite. Jesus said, "Go make disciples of all nations." But I'm going to take a look here at the end and just see if there's any indication of. We know that in Revelation 7 it says a great multitude from every tribe and language, from all people. So not just Jewish people, but people from every nation are there in Revelation 7. Here, Paul says, we who are still alive and are left will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. So we do know people are still alive. It's not like everybody's dead. And he says we, and he himself is a Christian, right? And he's talking to a Christian church in Thessalonica. So I think right there, that rules out the idea that all Christians will be dead, because he's saying that we, Christians, will still be alive. He's not just talking to Jews as a Jew. He as a Christian is talking to a Christian church in Thessalonica, the Thessalonian church, and he's saying that we're all still going to be alive. So I think that kind of settles it right there, right off the bat. But let's take a look just for fun. Let's take a look in Revelation. I'm kind of curious if it mentions all nations in Revelation 20, for example, when he says, "I saw the souls of those who've been beheaded because of their testimony, worshipped the beast, received the mark. They came to life, reigned with Christ 1,000 years." So I want to see if it might say here something about people of different. Oh yeah. Well, here it says Satan will go out to, after the 1,000 years, Satan will go out to deceive the nations, right? Not just the Jews. So there's more than just the Jews left on earth by the time Jesus comes back to reign. And that's the last moment we have in history that's pre-recorded, is when Christ reigns with us. After that, we're going to make history with God in the new heaven and new earth. So I would say that definitely there's all nations are still alive. So I think, unless we're misunderstanding what your pastor is saying, I would say that is an unbiblical statement to say that only Jews will be alive. at any time, because there's no time that only Jews will be alive. There will always be all nations alive. And even here it says, I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne. Out of another book, the dead were judged according to what they had done. Sea gave up the dead that were in them. Each person was judged according to what they had done, which would include people from every nation again. So, you pretty much see all nations throughout the Bible. There's never a time where there's only Jews on the earth. So if that's the question that you're asking, I'm not sure if it is, if I'm understanding correctly, but if that's the question, like, is there ever a time that it's just Jews that are alive? I would say no. There's never a time biblically that we can see that only Jewish people are alive. In fact, we see the opposite, that God wants to save all nations. The reason the Jews were the original people of the Bible is because God had to work through somebody. He had to pick somebody. So he picked Abraham. He could have just as well picked Bob or, Francis or Sally or whoever. He could have chose to work through anybody. He had to work through somebody. So he picked Abraham, and so it happened to become the children of Abraham, which became known as the Jews, from the line of Judah and Judea. So, but that didn't make them any more special than anybody else. It's just that God had to start somewhere, right? So you had to start with Adam and Eve, or you had to start with Noah, or you had to start with Abraham. So that's really why there's a Jewish people, and why they're quote unquote special is simply because they were the founding generation of Christianity, of God's people. But ultimately, it was always his plan to save every nation. From the very beginning of the Bible to the very end, he always talks about every nation of the Bible being saved. And I don't know if it mentions nations anymore here. Oh, yeah. The glory, here it is. Revelation 21, the glory and honor of the nations will be brought into it. So it's talking about the new heaven and new earth. And it says the glory and honor of the nations, not just the Jewish nation, but all nations will go into it. That's what Jesus talked about in Matthew 28. He said, go make disciples, not of your fellow Jews alone, but go make disciples of all nations. And that was actually a problem that Peter had, because Peter was just kind of hanging out with the Jews. And Paul called him out on it and said, hey, man, you're kind of being racist, you could say, by today's terms, what we would say, by only hanging out with Jewish people. You need to reach out to everybody. And spend time with everybody, and because he would only eat with the Jews and wouldn't eat with the Gentiles, and so Paul kind of called him out on that. And here it says, Revelation 22. Now this is the last chapter of the Bible. It'll be a healing tree for the healing of the nations, not just the Jewish nation. Let's see if there's any others here in this chapter. I think that might be the last nations in the last chapter, but. So basically, every chapter from beginning to end, every book of the Bible from beginning to end, even from Genesis with Abraham, he says all nations will ultimately stream into the children of Abraham. Let me just go over there real quick. Genesis 12. In Genesis 12, it says all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you. So again, not just the Jewish people, but all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through Abraham. So we are ultimately following the line of Abraham or the Jews, but it's not just Abraham's people or the Jewish people. It will be all people, all the peoples on the earth. And then just to close it out, that to reiterate what Jesus said in Matthew 28 there, at the end of Matthew 28, this is right before. This is one of the last things Jesus ever says. It's the last chapter of Matthew before he ascends into heaven. It says, all authority has been in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, go make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you, and ensuring them with you always to the very end of the age. So it was always about all nations. It was never just about the Jewish people. It's just that it had to start somewhere. So God started with Abraham, and then it went from there. Your other question was, will major persecution happen here like around the rest of the world before the rapture? It sure seems that way. Excuse me. I have to drink a little water there. Yeah, it would seem to be the case. Let's look here in Revelation 6. It talks about a great earthquake. If he's is persecution? Well, let me make sure I got your question correctly here, because you say is persecution. Will persecution happen here, like around the rest of the world, before the rapture? Well, the simple answer to that is it's already happening. People are already being persecuted. They've been persecuted. We've been persecuted ever since Jesus ascended into heaven, and we're going to be persecuted until Jesus returns and takes us home to heaven. So there's really no end to the persecution. It's been going on forever, and so there's already persecution happening now. People are being persecuted and killed for their faith. So yes, I guess what I would think is maybe what you're getting at is, will there be major persecution? Will there be major persecution, like regarding the tribulation specifically before we get taken? And that's what we're all kind of wondering, frankly. Persecution comes from man. God's wrath comes from God. So the real question is, when is God going to unleash his wrath? Because he's going to want to take us out of the way before he unleashes his wrath. There is a 7-year period that Daniel talks about in the time of Jacob's trouble, and that's what we're looking at. Sort of this generation will not pass away with the fig tree generation, and we're kind of at that mark now of 7 years. That it pretty much, if it hasn't started, if we don't consider that it started already, which we could, because we have war, we have famine, we have people being poisoned, we have it all. So you could argue it's already begun, but if it hasn't, it pretty much has to begin. I mean, technically by the Enoch calendar, it would have had begin already, but if you want to argue the Gregorian calendar, then it would have to begin by May 14th for it to still be within 80 years of them, if we're considering Psalm 90 to be the consideration for that. So of 80 years being a generation. So yeah. So I guess, that's a question God has to answer. How much is he going to let us go through? Because we've already had to kind of endure. He's protected us through this time if we've seeking him, but how much are we going to still have to go through before he ultimately takes us? And that's the question we all want to know the answer to, and we hope it gets answered really soon. So hopefully that helps answer your question, Freya. I appreciate it, and it's good having you in the chats, and I appreciate your comments and thoughts and feedback and everything. So thanks for sending that question, and hopefully this gets to you and helps to answer your questions. If you have any other questions about that, let me know, and I'm happy to try to clarify that for you. But I figured I'd just send it here as a private video. But it's some interesting questions, and you never know. It's something else you could probably bring up again during our group discussion, and maybe other people would benefit from the answer as well. Okay, thanks so much, and hope to talk to you soon. May God bless you. Have a good one.